When we think of the greats of the game like Tiger, VJ, Trevino, we think of the impact they've had not only on our game but ourselves as well. Lurking in the shadows of the golfing world hides a man considered the greatest ball striker of all time. Someone you've probably never heard of, but after watching this will never forget. Only two players have ever truly owned their swings: Mo Norman and Ben Hogan. Tiger Woods. Mo Norman was the best golfer I've ever seen. He was incredible and God's gift to golf. VJ Singh. I don't know of any player ever who could strike a ball like Mo Norman. He's a legend with the professionals and a genius when it comes to playing the game of golf. Lee Trevino. Born in 1929, Kitchener, Ontario, Murray Irwin Norman grew up in a small house in a working-class neighbourhood. Growing up in an industrial city where the sky was often black, the air smelled of burning rubber, and money was very tight, dreams rarely ever came true. From an early age, it was quite apparent that Murray was quite different from his other siblings and struggled to fit in. His mannerisms and his odd personality made him slip into the background and not want to join in. From what we know now, Murray was born with autism and was quite high on the spectrum. But back then, autism had only been discovered 10 years before in Germany, and diagnosis wasn't really a thing. So although being a little different, Murray never let anything get in his way. All was normal till around age 5, when Murray was involved in a horrific accident. He and a little friend were both on a sled heading down a snowy hill. The speed got the better of them and they couldn't stop, skidding into the path of traffic. Murray found himself trapped under a car and was dragged some distance. The police came to investigate and Norman had a bruised cheek, and his parents, like many families at the height of the Depression, were in no position to take hospital visits lightly. It was not obvious immediately, but something serious had happened to Norman that day. The side of his face shifted, bones were moved, and from that point on, his mother said his personality was different. Shortly thereafter, schoolmates and teachers noticed that he was talking in a different voice, and he began to repeat himself a lot. At school, he began struggling in every subject, bar one, math, at which he was a prodigy and had a phenomenal memory. After his accident, his face was never the same, and the bullying began. Murray began finding solace in sports and specifically enjoyed golf as he could be alone. At the age of 11, the lonely, strange little boy got himself a gig caddying at the Kitchener's Westmount Golf Club. One of Murray Norman's first clients at the golf course started greeting him with Mo the Schmo, the Pinnacle Pro. It was a goofy handle, but it stuck. Mo Norman was named on the golf course. Carrying clubs all day really gave him the bug to practice as soon as he got off work. At home, he began practicing in the garden with a bent branch for a club and seriously tried to get good at the game. 2 years he practiced with that bent lump of wood until eventually upgrading to a hockey stick. Thankfully, a member at the golf course found out about Mo's practice habits and sold him an old 5-iron which he paid in 10-cent weekly installments. Mo was left-handed, but the club he had bought was right-handed, so he had no choice but to switch. Mo loved that job, and he probably could have kept it for many years, but was sacked when he was in his teens. One of the clients gave Mo a crappy tip at the end of a round, and he was so insulted that he chucked the guy's clubs up into a tree. Now on his own again, Norman looked towards his family for support, but they all just made fun of him. His father told him to play a real sport and that he couldn't bring his clubs inside the house, whereas his siblings would tease him, calling golf a sissy sport. Armed only with a 5-iron, Mo began hitting hundreds upon hundreds of golf balls each day. He would practice in his family's tiny backyard by hitting balls against a neighbour's garage, and quickly developed a local reputation as a golf terrorist when he would break a neighbour's window, as he did 11 times in 2 years, usually because he was aiming at one. When he wasn't irritating the neighbours, Mo would practice in a nearby field, maybe 200 yards long. The grass was that tall he had to use an iron to cut the grass down to fairway height into a little square and hit balls from that. Fear of losing his old, cherished, battered balls increased his desire to hit straight shots. He would hit balls until his hands bled, and when his grips became slippery, wipe them away on his towel and trousers. When he got home, he looked as though he had been working in a slaughterhouse. Mo's swing was entirely self-taught, and his progression was not immediate. He didn't break 100 until he was 16, but by 19 his swing was that grooved he could hit the ball wherever he wanted. He would wrap lead tape on his driver to bulk up its weight, and took less time than almost any pro to size up his shots, never taking a practice swing. Equipped with quite the game, Norman began playing in competitions around Canada. His first major step in his competitive journey came in 1949 at the St. Thomas Golf and Country Club, a one-day amateur event. Norman had not been invited to the tournament, but showed up on the day wearing sneakers, carrying 7 clubs in a tatty old bag, but luckily was given an empty slot. Playing against a field that included several of Ontario's amateur stars, he shot 67 and won by 2 strokes. Too shy to attend the awards dinner, he slipped away after finishing his round. A friend had to collect Norman's prize and apologise on his behalf. Norman kept on grinding and those prizes kept on coming, but a person can only use so many colour TVs and wear so many watches. Mo became so confident in his abilities that he would size up the prize list, find out what his friends wanted to buy from him, and then finish his round accordingly. If second prize was a kitchen set that a friend had agreed to buy, Norman would drop however many strokes he needed to finish second. No one could call it cheating, but organisers were still freaked out by it. Norman wasn't like the other golfers in the tournaments he played. For one thing, he played fast. He would sometimes lie down and pretend to sleep in the fairway, waiting for the slower players to hit. At the Masters, his cheeky personality saw him hitting the ball whilst announcers were introducing his name, and once he putted the ball between the foot and outstretched arm of a playing partner who was marking his ball. Becoming more and more comfortable with tournament golf, Mo was really starting to come out of his shell. In 1955, he walked away with the Canadian amateur title, which no Canadian had managed to do for a few years previous. Norman's background also set him apart. Unlike most of the other top amateurs, he didn't belong to a country club. He often hitchhiked to and from tournaments, and he had to juggle his competitive schedule with a succession of dull factory jobs. After that win, people were calling it a fluke. They said his attitude wasn't what it should be. He wasn't serious enough. His clothes always clashed. His teeth were a fright. He buttoned his shirts up too high. Mo just didn't fit in, and people didn't want him there winning their prestigious events. Norman dealt with the haters in the best possible way. He came back the following year to win again. The growth of Norman was out of the Royal Canadian Golf Association's hands, but they were doing everything in their power to strip him of his titles. His clowning on the golf course and his desire for selling his prizes had long infuriated the RCGA. Taking money under the table was a common practice among amateurs, but no player was as open about it as Norman was. The RCGA threatened to strip him of his amateur status, so to protect his 2 years of winnings, Norman had to make the not-so-easy decision to turn pro. The only problem being in those days, it wasn't as easy as just turning pro and then playing on a tour. You needed to be a paid golfer to qualify as a professional, and nobody was about to hire Mo Norman after all that backlash. However, there were a handful of people who saw through Norman's peculiarities and appreciated the talented, decent guy behind the quirks. One of them stepped up in 1958 and hired Norman as an assistant at a driving range. With that gig, Norman could qualify, get his pro card, and sign up for his first professional golf tournament. His first tournament as a card-carrying pro was the 3-day Ontario Open. He shot 68, 69, 74, and won by 3. On the road though, Mo's habits began getting weirder. He started to store all of his clothes in the back seat of his car. Even though he lived in motels, he never kept a permanent home and never had a dating life, and would even slip back onto the golf courses at night to sleep in bunkers. In 1959, and after a 3rd place finish in a Canadian qualifying event, Norman won partial exemption onto the PGA Tour. His debut was at the LA Open, and straight away the feeling of unwantedness was breathing down his neck. The honour of playing with greats such as Sam Snead, Ben Hogan, and other heroes of the day was all a little bit too much for Mo. He could hear the sly comments and remarks from not only the fans but the professionals as well. Norman's driving and irons were phenomenal, though his putting was weak. Mo knew if he just laid around the middle of the pack, he wouldn't attract much attention, and as long as he wasn't on the leaderboard, they mostly ignored him. He continued to play indifferently with occasional flashes of brilliance until the tour reached New Orleans. There he shot 4 solid rounds, played in the final group on Sunday, led briefly, and tied for 4th. After that performance, the PGA Tour players sensed a win, so they took matters into their own hands. Some big-name players who have never been named cornered Mo in the locker room and gave him a humiliating scolding, chewing him up and spitting him right back out. The message was to stop clowning around, fix your teeth, stop talking so weirdly and dress better. It was a harrowing experience for someone who was already painfully shy and suffered with extreme social anxiety. It went on and broke him from the inside. Mo got in his car and drove away, and never played on the PGA Tour again. From that point on, Norman played and stayed close to his home in Ontario, which is not to say he lost any of his killer game. Norman strung together an incredible 55 Canadian Tour wins. He was the Canadian PGA champion in 1966 and 1974. He won the Canadian Seniors PGA Championship every year but one between 1979 and 1987. He set course records by the bagful. He hit all-time lowest scores on 33 different golf courses. He notched 17 holes in one that we know about and was inducted into the Canadian Hall of Fame in 1995. Norman was at home and relatively at ease playing Canadian tournaments. The crowds were friendlier, and as he aged, he became more at ease around other people. But more importantly, Mo was allowed to have fun again. Approaching a tee box and told it's a driver 9-iron. Just for laughs, he hit 9-iron driver and put it to about 6 foot. He'd also aimed for narrow bridges over creeks rather than laying up. All of this was just the daily show of watching Mo Norman. By the 1990s, Norman's single plane swing, unusual though it was, had caught the attention of the Natural Golf Company, whose owner befriended and paid a modest sum to Norman to put on demonstrations for fans, and help explain how his approach could help golfers find their own version of happiness on the course. Norman bounced along, neither getting rich nor going flat broke, until he finally caught a break from the Titleist Corporation. Wally Ouline, the president, met with Norman and his long-trusted friend Gus Moore at a 1995 PGA merchandise show. Ouline shook Norman's hand and offered him $5,000 a month for life. Norman wanted to know what he had to do for the money. Titleist said by playing their balls his whole career, he'd already earned it. The monthly Titleist checks took a load of worry off of Norman. He could do as he pleased from that point on, which meant living in the same motel, keeping all of his stuff in the back of a newer caddy, and slowly driving himself along back roads to wherever golf took him. In September 2004, congestive heart failure ended Norman's life in a Kitchener hospital. A life of such a kind, loving man had come to an end. All his life, Murray had done things his way, and even when pressured to fit in, didn't bow down and listen. Who knows what Mo could have been on the PGA Tour? I guess we'll never know. But to get all the greats worried like he did, they must have saw something in him. Mo touched the hearts of many people whilst he was alive, and didn't get the recognition he deserved. But since his passing, his legend lives on, and we can all learn something from Mo. Just be kind.